about it again in Revelation. When we read Daniel 8, 3 and 4, then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher come up last. I saw a ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and become great. Now, these beasts are typologies to kings, of course, as most of you would realise. And it's about conquering more land, northward, westward, southward. And this one kingdom had so much power that nobody could stand before him. He became great. So, we're going to begin with the city of Turkey, today known as Istanbul. It's been a site of human settlement for, I understand, about 3,000 years. It was originally founded by Thracian tribes. Some of you that watch a lot of old movies and warmongering movies, you might have heard of the Thracian tribes between the 13th and 11th centuries that become colonised by the Greeks in the 7th century before Christ. Colonised means to establish political rule over an area, like dictatorship over an area. So the Thracian tribes, which are actually very powerful, they sound little, but actually they reigned across many continents. But they did become eventually colonised. That means political control by the Greeks in the 7th century before Christ. And it reigned until it fell to the Roman Republic in AD 196, so 196 years after Christ's crucifixion. We could see Roman Empire was growing huge at the time. It was a fearful state at the time, and it grew and grew and grew. And here we see in AD 196 years after Christ's death, the city known today as Istanbul fell to the Roman Republic. That is the Roman Empire. At the time, in Turkey, Istanbul, it wasn't called Istanbul, it was called Byzantine. Some of you might have followed those three names. Byzantine fell, then Constantinople fell, and today that same city is called Istanbul. So, at that time, when Rome took it over, its name was Byzantine. And Rome ruled to AD 330. That's when it was renamed Byzantine that's when it was renamed Constantinople. So Byzantine was the whole area. Constantinople become the new name, the major capital part of Turkey. Where you're here today, it's called Istanbul. So it was called Constantinople after the leader at the time, which was called Constantine the Great. So what's surprising for someone that never read much history like myself was that when Rome took over Byzantine's capital and renamed it Constantinople, it was actually called the new capital of the Roman Empire. Look, this is not in Christian literature, this is in historical literature that I've been researching. So Constantine naming naming the city Constantinople made that the new capital of the Roman Empire, which was called Nova Rome, meaning New Rome. So we all think today is Rome being on the Seven Hills, which it still is. But the capital of Rome, after Rome fell, became in Byzantine Turkey. We're just discussing this much theory about these end times and who is going to start the Third World War. And most of us generally just point to Russia. So I've been doing historical study.
Russia's blamed for everything.
Yeah, they are. They're blamed for everything.
Russia gets the blame for the elections in America, everything.
Yeah, they do. They do. And we will definitely get to that. Why they're still getting the blame today. It's interesting to study history because the Bible declares that what has happened in the past is what's going to happen in the future. So I wanted to find Russia in the past. But Russia's actually pretty clean in the past.
Okay.
So the Bible declares this beast, these world powers, there's one world power in the end, the United Nations and their supporters have to have had a historical event, major historical event in the past. And I've spent time studying non-Christian papers but basic literature to affirm where these guys and who stood out. And as so we've found that, you know, Rome after it fell in 196 years after AD, after Christ's death, took over Byzantine. Constantine the Great, he called himself, as all the popes do, as the Bible describes the mother harlot, called themselves great. Then renamed Byzantine the new capital of the Roman Empire. It was one of the very few capitals that stood out to me as a child, and I understand why. That's why I've always said there was Byzantine, God took it down. There was Constantinople, God took it down. And right from very young, I remember that it would become, as it currently has all my life, been called Istanbul. And I mean literally Istanbul caca comes out of there as far as religious belief comes. God doesn't make a mistake with his names. And so that became the new capital of the Roman Empire. Now it rose, as we know, to one of the largest empires of the Western world, a population peaking, back at that time, 500,000 people.
Where?
In Rome and Byzantine. They just conquered out, yeah. So Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Now, this empire in Turkey only ended with a Muslim conquest in 1453. Constantinople then became the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire consists of the Muslim nations, a lot of the Muslim nations combined, which grew to a population of 700,000 in the 16th century. At that time, the 16th century, they were second in size only to Beijing and China. So we're talking about huge numbers according to the population of the world. And it was only outnumbered soon after in population in the 18th century by the London's population. This was also the time where the Protestant movement was happening. The Protestants never called themselves Protestants. The Roman Catholics called them Protestants because they protested against Roman religious corruption. When the Republic of Turkey, 96% Muslim, was formed in 1923, the capital was moved from Constantinople to Ankara.
Sit down.
And I wondered why they would move.
Sit down.
I wondered why they would move from Constantinople to Ankara. But I found out that Katie's done a lot of travelling. She would have seen too that Byzantine is a seaport. It was very vulnerable for war, for people to come, and that's how it was conquered several times. Primarily they could bring their ships right in and around it. So that is the reason why the Muslims then moved their capital to Ankara, because Ankara at that stage was pretty basic. They run the industry just on primarily goats, according to history, and it was easy for the Muslims to re-establish a new colonising there, because they had no real stand and no opinions. So they created their political and religious stand there. Since 1930, the name Istanbul has been, of course, the sole official name of the city in Turkish. And it has replaced that traditional name that we see so much in history, Constantinople. The name Turkey is derived from Latin Turkisha, that is the land of Turks, historically saying, making a point that it was completely separate territory from Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Though Ankara is Turkey's political capital, everything else today has remained in Istanbul. Why? Because it's the major trade centre, the major trade port. Turkey today is 99.8% registered Muslims, with a few Greek Orthodox and a few Jews. So when we're talking about Turkey's political capital and the Muslims, we've got the name come about as the Ottoman Empire. Powerful. So here we're seeing two empires, where we talked about the goat and the ram in Revelations, and it's further Revelations that brings us over to actually tell us what those countries were. So Rome was a superpower, but we had the Muslims come in as a greater superpower at the time, taking over the capital city. So the Muslims continue to expand into Eastern Anatolia, Central Europe, the Caucasus, North and Eastern Africa, the islands of Mediterranean, and the greater Syria, Mesopotamia. Some of you that read the Bible, those names will be familiar to you. The Arabian Peninsula in the 15th, 16th and 17th centuries. So the Ottoman, the Islamic Empire's power and prestige peaked in the 17th, 16th and 17th centuries. Now God told in Genesis that Ishmael's descendants would grow in great in number, and that they also would be against all men, and as today, they're trying to fulfill the Hadith. The Hadith is not the Quran. The Hadith is the book of things Muhammad believed. They're two separate books, that they're to conquer the world before their Saviour comes back. And we see it, the whole thing starting up all over again now. So the Islamic Empire at that time was often, not once, often at odds with the Holy Roman Empire, because Holy Roman Empire was greedy. You hear of all the roads lead to Rome. They'd conquered so much you know, real beasts, when God used the word beasts, the absolute beasts without mercy. And the we get the Ottoman Empire driving toward Rome to take some of those conquered lands back, you know, going towards Central Europe and the Polish Commonwealth. The Ottomans were also at war, that is, the Muslims were also at war with Persia over, again, territory disputes. They also fought Spain, things you never think of with the Muslim war. We hear Ottoman, but we've got to look up who the people were. They fought against Spain for control of the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. Their navy often confronted the Portuguese fleets to control its monopoly over the maritime, that is, the ocean-going trade routes between East Asia and Western Europe. So we hear of the trade, the great trade, the powerful trade harlots in the Bible. These two major traders, the Ottomans, the Muslims, and then you've got the Roman Catholics, the two major powers. They've both had their heads risen up in the past. With Russia, at the time, coming into the First World War, had the largest army of 1,400,000 soldiers. Now, the Ottomans, after being conquered in World War I, and with Germany, you know, Germany coming on the scene, I'm just trying to understand my writing sometimes. Russia had the longest army in the world at the time. Then after being conquered in World War II, see, here we see Russia attacked by Germany. I haven't found anything yet in the history where Russia started the attack. Germany was in cahoots with the Ottomans. They had trade going on. A treaty, I don't know if any of you have heard of it, Graham and John might have, Carlowet in 1619. This was before World War I, marked the Ottoman territorial retreat, where some territories were taken off them by, you know, the Carlowet Treaty formed to try and stop warring. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the Ottoman Empire continued losing territories. So here we see the powerful Muslim Ottoman Empire gradually losing territories, including Greece, Algiers, Tunisia, Libya, the Balkans. The Balkans, they lost in the war with the Balkans. By the 20th century, up they came again. The Ottoman, the Muslim Empire, rose up this time, cunning, because they'd be quite separatist, just Islamic only. But in the 20th century, we saw the rise of the Ottoman Empire rising in what they called nationalism. They included not just who they were, with Turks, Armenians, Assyrians, Kurds, Greeks, French and Italians. Why? Because the Ottomans, of course, were losing ground, so they made an alliance with other countries, including Germany. And Germany supported the Ottoman Empire with troops and equipment in the First World War. You never think of the Ottomans having such impact on Muslims in the First World War, do you? You never really hear about it. But when you actually read the old historical records, independent records from Britannica and all that, it's interesting who the major groups of people were. Germany jumped on the scene because they were doing trade with the Ottomans, the Muslims. And other countries had jumped on board too for their benefit. It was all about trade. Not like they were friends. It was all a matter of convenient marriage relationships. In 1914 to 1918, the Ottoman, the Muslim Empire, entered World War I and were eventually defeated. I understand that to be the little horn. During World War I, they committed major atrocities such as genocide, mass murder, death marches, intentionally denying food and water to the deportees, such as the Armenians, the Syrians, the Pontic Greeks, causing millions of deaths. After World War I, the Ottoman Islamic Empire's huge conglomeration of territories and peoples were once again, by the Allied powers, divided up into several new states, just like the Bible says in Revelations, how they're divided up. These kings are divided up to new states. On October 1918, the Armistice of Madrid was signed, followed by imposed Treaty of Sèvres, it's called Treaty of Sèvres, on August the 10th, 1920, by the Allied powers, which was actually never ratified. The Ottoman Empire was broken up, forced to relinquish right over many countries they had subdued in war. So the Muslim conglomerate was broken up. We've got the Armistice of Madrid, the Allied powers that broke it down, made them let go of many countries they had control on. So looking for Daniel's prophecy in World War II was my next thing to try and find if Putin's like, we could blame Putin for anything. The First World War began in Austria-Hungary, combined with allies of the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, known as, they were called the Quadruple Alliance, the German Quadruple Alliance. It faced defeat by the Allied powers, which we know are from this side across America, England, New Zealand, Australia. Yeah, Russia, Britain, France, all come against it. So where are we? So World War II, there was Germany, Italy, Japan, Great Britain, France, and Australia and New Zealand, India, Soviet Union, China, and United States of America. So see, Russia's with us there, not against us. Turkey in the Second World War, what was called the broken up Ottoman Empire, remained neutral until 1945. Then it began supporting Germany, Italy, and Japan. Now, when we find out the gripe between America and Russia, it was the Cold War. And I always thought, what the heck is the Cold War? But the Cold War was after World War II. The main enemies were United States and Soviet Union. The Cold War got its name because both sides were afraid of fighting each other in a hot war, which means a nuclear war. and lasting tension has remained to this day. So this nuclear issue between Russia and America remains today, and whether Russia deserves it or not, they historically I can't find that they do.
I watched this thing where Putin wanted Trump or like America to confess and tell the world what's going on with like their hidden agendas and what's all this secret with the government and stuff.
Putin's been made into the bad guy. We've seen that so much in history. No disrespect against America, but you know, the Japanese were really, really bad, and this one's really, really bad. Whoever they fall out is really, really bad until someone bad comes along. You know, someone less
I like
convenient.
a lot of what Putin says and does runs in his country. I mean,
Well, actually, communism, if it was used correctly, is a very good thing. Everybody's equal.
This country could do with a little bit.
well, a lot of it was, you know, what I've read about Putin and what I thought was really good. But
Yeah. Oh, please don't think I'm trying to portray him the good guy. All as I've done is studied before the First World War, from 300 before Christ, the First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War, trying to find who's the bad guy that we're warned about through Ezekiel, through Daniel, through Revelations, because God said in Isaiah that they have been and are going to rise up again. I haven't seen that trouble from Russia. It's been the Ottoman Empire and Rome.
Russia are actually peaceful.
Yeah,
They don't want
That's
no
the
war.
kidding,
Pope,
I've
man, it's the
independently
Pope.
studied
Russia doesn't want
independent
war.
Yeah,
history.
the Pope is
That's
the
the
mother
Pope.
harlot too.
Yeah.
Or Catholic.
It's the Roman
Roman
Catholic,
Catholic.
same spirit as the Muslim. They're both making treaties together now saying we can all be one. But what's going to happen then, I think, is totally amazing, because they're going to come together. The Pope's going to accept Rome, accept the Muslim, but I think the Muslim's going to knock the Pope off his seat and kill him and take over. Don't quote me, but this is what I'm getting. And then it was only Christ's return that will stop the Muslim rule across the world for 3.5 years.
Yeah, in Revelations it said they hate her, the mother harlot.
Yeah, they actually
And then they
hate her,
said
but
like
for
one day,
convenience.
in Revelation it says that great city Babylon will fall. And they'll be like, yay, she has fallen.
Yeah.
And then next minute sudden destruction comes on men.
Even in their hand, that is written. They talk about it. They use for their convenience. So it's all just theory. We're just trying to put together something here. It's said by historians that Roman Emperor Constantine, around 2,100 years ago, had a vision of Christ telling him to use the cross as a sign against his enemy. He did it against Maxentius, the Pope at the time, and he won the battle. So he sort of got that Roman dictatorship power of people pretending, I believe he was Christian. They'd fallen in numbers huge, and they're trying to gather numbers. And in some history they say Constantine brought Christianity through Turkey and Europe and whatnot, but a lot of red indicates he just used it. And anyway, if anything, he was Roman Catholic, because he worshipped Mary and, and loved himself. He called himself Constantine the Great, and he considered himself to be God on earth. That's why Byzantine's gone down, Constantinople went down, and Seville's going to go down. So it's still Mother Harlot centre.
No, that's a part of the Pope's thing. Like, if you're Pope, you are one with God. You're this
You've
saying
got
that you authority
all Christianity,
and
hey?
you can pardon all men's sins.
Yeah.
and he's the mediator. You can go to him and ask for pardon.
Whereas John's prayer, there is one mediator
Yeah.
between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. But the Roman Empire, with the Pope in the centre of, claims he is God on earth and the one that can forgive sins and mediate. That is Satan's throne.
Yeah.
Satan's throne, because it denies the truth of salvation. They collect money to build empires that can't offer salvation in their heart.
Don't blink, I'll get on your seat.
Yeah. So the Roman period of Anatolia began with the death. I won't get it. Oh yeah, began with the death of Attalus. Our Pergamon. Anyone read the word Pergamon in Revelations?
Purgatory? Is that the same word?
Pergamon. If you open your Bibles, these are all showing us who the harlot is. If you go to Revelations chapter 1, and you go chapter 2, and we're told exactly where Satan's seat, that is the access of evil. Now there's evil all around the world, but the evil of evils is one that denies salvation and takes power control at any cost and any cruel brutality. That is the person that has eyes but is demonic, that comes across as an angel of light but is Satan's seat. If you read Revelations chapter 2, verse 11 will start. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of a second death. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things saith he which has a sharp sword with two edges. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is.
That's in Turkey today.
That's in Turkey today. And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my face, even in those days when Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. So you got Pergamos, you got Turkey here on a front radar. Remember, it was Turkey where Noah's Ark landed. It was Turkey where the Bible talks about the springs of water coming out. It was obviously, makes me wonder if God gave truth and they just denied it.
Have you seen it? Did they set the stage? Have you seen the throne?
No. Oh. Yeah, it'd be exciting to see it though. Constantinople the Great, he called himself, as they transferred his capital from Rome to Byzantine.